The silence of Aethelburg Station was a carefully constructed symphony. The thrum of the great fusion core in its heart, the whisper of atmosphere recyclers in the ventilation shafts, the gentle chiming of transit cars arriving and departing from the central spire. It was the sound of 782 species living in a state of meticulously balanced, commercially profitable peace. The station, a gleaming spindle of alabaster composites and crystalline viewports, hung in the gravitational cradle between the gas giant Emir and its largest moon, a testament to the Cathar Imperium's genius for engineering and obsessive risk management. Ava Rostova, maintenance technician third class, heard a different symphony. Hers was the hiss of a plasma torch scoring a weld, the groan of a stressed support strut in Sector Delta 4, the faint, almost subliminal ticking of a failing hydraulic regulator in one of the cargo bay's primary airlocks. She moved through the station's guts, the cramped, unglamorous crawlspaces between the pristine public corridors, with the fluid grace of a creature born to it. Her patched coveralls were stained with lubricant and sealant, and her datapad's case was scarred with the marks of dropped tools. To the diplomats and traders in the spire, Aethelburg was a monument. To Ava, it was a machine, a complex and temperamental beast she knew by its creaks and groans. The first tremor was subtle, a discordant note in the station's hum. It felt less like a vibration and more like the station had skipped a beat in its rotation. Ava, braced inside a service junction, paused her work, her head tilting. On her datapad, a dozen minor systems flickered from green to amber. Then, without warning, the universe slammed into them. A colossal, gut-wrenching shudder tore through the station's frame. The lights in the crawlspace didn't flicker. They died, plunging her into absolute blackness as the emergency power failed to kick in. A sound followed, not a bang, but a deep, resonant crump that was felt in the bones more than heard, the sound of a drum the size of a moon being struck once. Red emergency strips flickered to life along the floor, casting the narrow tunnel in a bloody, pulsing light. Her datapad shrieked, a cacophony of alarms, catastrophic structural failure, multiple hull breaches, atmospheric venting in Sector Gamma 7, the main cargo and docking sector for independent freighters, always bustling, always packed with beings from 100 worlds bartering and loading goods. Station control, this is Rostova in Service Corridor G42, she said into her comm, her voice steady despite the adrenaline firing through her veins. What was the impact source? Static. Then a clipped, automated voice devoid of panic. Containment protocol initiated. All personnel maintain current position. Blast doors in sectors Gamma, Epsilon, and Zeta are sealing. Await instructions. Instructions. Ava knew what that meant. The Cathar, who managed station security and crisis response, operated on a brutal, unassailable logic. They would calculate, they would model. They would sacrifice a limb to save the body. They would write off Gamma 7 and everyone in it if their threat matrices showed a 1% chance of a cascade failure that could compromise the station's core. Time for them was a variable in an equation. For the people trapped in Gamma 7, it was the air bleeding out into space. Through a small, grimy viewport in the service tunnel, she could see a section of the main promenade in Gamma 7. The internal gravity was fluctuating wildly. Beings, lanky Orpheans, squat Grolics, even a few humans from the freighter Stardust Drifter, were slammed against the ceiling, then the floor. A fine mist of ice crystals, frozen atmosphere, was already forming near a jagged tear in the outer hull. The screams over the public comm channel were a chaotic chorus of terror before the channel went dead, silenced by the encroaching vacuum. Ava's decision wasn't a decision at all. It was an instinct, a reflex honed by a lifetime of seeing problems that needed fixing now. She scrambled through the tunnels, her movements sure and swift in the hellish red light. She ignored the automated voice that now droned warnings about unauthorized movement. She reached Emergency Locker 9C, a lonely metal cabinet in a deserted access corridor. She slapped her palm on the reader. It beeped angrily. Access denied, Level 4 lockdown. Ava grunted and pulled a heavy magnetic pry bar from her tool belt. 2 sharp, expertly placed jolts and the lock mechanism shattered. The cabinet door swung open. Inside were 2 vacuum work suits. They weren't the armored EVA models the Cathar security forces used. They were clumsy, unshielded things for exterior maintenance, with bulky helmets and a limited air supply. They were better than nothing. She started shimming into one, the seals hissing as they connected. She grabbed a portable plasma cutter, a canister of quickseal foam, and a coil of high-tensile tether cable. Improvised tools for an impossible job. As she was sealing her helmet, another figure came running down the corridor, limned by the emergency lights. It was Dr. Ben Carter, the human physician from the station's small, multi-species clinic. He was a lanky man whose calm demeanor always seemed at odds with the barely controlled chaos of his workplace. Now, his face was a mask of grim purpose. "I had a feeling I'd find you here," he said, his voice slightly breathless. He was carrying a large, heavy medkit. "They're sealing it off, Ben," Ava said, her voice tinny through the suit's internal calm. "They're going to let them die." "No, I was listening to the command channel," Ben replied, his eyes going to the second suit. "The Cathar Chief Vorlag is talking about acceptable losses and structural integrity probabilities. He's locking it down until a full risk assessment is complete. That's 6 hours, minimum." "They don't have 6 hours. They don't have 6 minutes," Ava said, tossing him the other suit. "Suit up." Ben didn't hesitate. He began pulling the thick fabric over his medical scrubs. "What's the plan?" "Plan is we get in there and pull out anyone who's still breathing. The main blast door to Gamma 7 is 3 corridors down. They'll have sealed it, but the manual release is on our side. They'll send security after us." "Them?" Ava grunted, checking the charge on the plasma cutter. Its power cell was at 72%. It would have to do. "They'll be following protocol. We'll be saving lives. Let's see who's faster." They moved together, 2 lone figures in bulky, mismatched gear, running against the flow of automated instructions, against the cold logic of survival, toward the sound of the breaking world. At the command and control spire, Cathar Security Chief Vorlag stood like a statue carved from obsidian chitin. His multifaceted eyes processed hundreds of data streams simultaneously on the holographic displays that filled the room. Structural integrity models warred with atmospheric pressure readings and life sign scanners. His armored carapace was immobile, betraying none of the complex calculations running through his mind. "Report," he commanded, his voice a low, resonant chitter. His second-in-command, a younger Cathar named Tezel, shifted his weight nervously. "Chief Vorlag, the blast doors are sealed. Sector Gamma 7 is isolated. Atmospheric pressure is at 0.01% and falling. Life sign readings are chaotic. We count approximately 112 distinct biosignatures before the impact. We now detect 17, all unstable." Vorlag's antennae twitched. 17. A 90% loss rate with the survivors likely minutes from death. The probability of a secondary detonation from the freighter fuel cells in Bay 3 was, according to the station's primary analysis engine, 38%. The probability of the structural failure cascading to the main reactor housing if another shockwave occurred was 12%. "We maintain quarantine," Vorlag stated. It was not a suggestion. "No rescue teams enter until the structural analysis is complete, and the risk of secondary detonation is below 1%. Send drones to survey the exterior hull for the impact site. We must understand the initial cause." Tezel hesitated, a breach of Cathar etiquette. "The 17 life signs, some are located near emergency habitat shelters. If a team could reach them, the probability of their survival is outweighed by the 12% probability of total station failure," Vorlag finished, his voice cold as the vacuum outside. "The needs of the 8,000 outweigh the needs of the 17. This is the primary axiom of crisis management. Do not question it." Just then, a new alert flashed on Vorlag's personal display. A flashing red icon, unauthorized entry. Emergency Locker 9C followed moments later by another. Unauthorized life signs detected. Service Corridor G44. Heading, Sector Gamma 7 Quarantine Door. The biosignatures were flagged as human. Vorlag's mandibles clicked together in a sharp, irritated snap. Humans, of course. The species that treated risk assessment as a personal affront. The species that ran on emotion and adrenaline, a chaotic mix that defied all predictive modeling. 2 humans are approaching the Gamma-7 blast door, he announced to the room. They are equipped with maintenance-grade vacuum suits. They are ignoring automated warnings. Teasel looked horrified. They will compromise the quarantine. They could trigger a secondary event. Precisely, Vorlag said. He brought up a schematic of the area. They cannot override the door controls from the corridor. They will have to cut through the manual release mechanism. That will take them approximately 4 minutes. He turned to his tactical officer. Dispatch Unit 4, armored EVA gear. Their objective is not rescue. Their objective is to apprehend the humans and secure the quarantine door. Use non-lethal force, but ensure compliance. The integrity of this station is paramount. He turned back to the main display, watching the 2 tiny human life signs move inexorably toward the sealed-off disaster zone. It was illogical, it was reckless. It was an act of statistical suicide, and deep within his logical, ordered mind, a tiny, unfamiliar spark of something else ignited, not admiration, perhaps curiosity. What equation could possibly lead to such a profoundly irrational, yet determined, course of action? He would find out, once they were safely in the brig. The blast door to Gamma-7 was a meter-thick slab of reinforced durasteel, its edges sealed tight with a hiss of finality just moments before Ava and Ben arrived. A large, illuminated sign above it pulsed in stark red letters, "Quarantine, biohazard, structural failure, do not enter." "Well, the sign's working," Ben muttered, his voice a little tight in the comms. "Give me a hand with this," Ava said, ignoring him. She pointed the plasma cutter at the emergency release panel, a smaller, recessed plate next to the main door. It was secured by 4 heavy bolts. "This is a mechanical release, not on the network. Once we cut these bolts, we can crank it open manually. Every alarm in the sector will scream our names to Vorlag," Ben added. "Let M scream," Ava said, bracing herself. "Cover me." She pulled the trigger. A brilliant, white-hot jet of plasma erupted from the cutter's nozzle with a deafening hiss, instantly vaporizing the air around it. She brought the beam to the first bolt. Metal glowed cherry red, then white, then liquid. The confined space filled with the acrid smell of burning steel. It was slow, painstaking work. The maintenance cutter was designed for precision welds, not heavy demolition. 80% charge, she grunted, sweat beading on her forehead inside her helmet. "Company's coming, Ava," Ben said, looking back down the corridor. He had his datapad synced to the station's security net, a feed he wasn't technically supposed to have access to. 4 Cathar heavy armor, ETA 3 minutes. "Need more power," Ava gritted out, pushing the cutter's output to its maximum. The device whined in protest. The third bolt slagged and fell away. 1 to go, 2 minutes Ava, they're moving fast. There, the final bolt gave way with a shower of sparks. The panel was free. Ava tossed the overheating cutter aside. It was down to 30% power, and grabbed the large, spoked wheel inside the recess. "Ben, help me." Together, they threw their weight against the wheel. It resisted, groaning with the protest of gears that hadn't been turned in years. Metal shrieked against metal. Slowly, agonizingly, the massive blast door began to move, rising a centimeter at a time. The sounds from the other side began to leak through, a low, moaning hiss, the sound of the last dregs of air being torn into the void. "They're here," Ben said, his voice grim. 4 massive figures, clad in the sleek black carapaces of Cathar assault armor, rounded the far end of the corridor. They moved with an unnerving, silent speed. The leader raised a weapon, a pulse rifle set to its stun setting. "Human," a synthesized voice boomed down the hall. "Cease your actions immediately. You are in violation of Station Emergency Protocol 1138. Surrender for containment." "No time," Ava yelled. The door was open barely half a meter, a dark, uninviting maw. "Go, Ben. Get in there, I'll hold them off." "Ava, don't be an idiot. The people inside are dying. Go." She shoved him toward the opening and turned to face the advancing Cathar, grabbing the heavy pry bar from her belt. A ridiculous, primitive weapon against their advanced armor. It was a bluff, a way to buy Ben a few more seconds. The lead Cathar didn't slow. It raised its rifle. But just as it was about to fire, the entire station lurched again, more violently this time. A support beam directly above the Cathar unit buckled under the strain, tearing loose from the ceiling. It crashed down with a deafening clang, not on the soldiers, but directly in their path, blocking the corridor with a tangled web of twisted metal and sparking conduits. It was the opening they needed. "Now, Ava," Ben yelled from inside the breach. Ava didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled under the partially raised door and rolled into the darkness of Sector Gamma 7. Behind her, she heard the sizzle of Cathar plasma torches beginning to cut through the new obstruction. They had bought themselves a little more time, but now they were trapped in the one place in the station nobody else dared to go. The other side of the blast door was another world. The gravity plating here was dead, leaving them in a disorienting zero-G environment. The only light came from their helmet lamps, cutting sharp, lonely cones through a thick haze of dust, debris, and glittering ice crystals. The silence was profound, broken only by the sound of their own breathing and the distant, mournful groaning of the station's dying structure. It was a tomb. "K," Ben said, his voice a low hum in Ava's ear. "Life sign scanner. My medkit has a short-range one, picking up 3 signatures close, in the main promenade." "The way," Ava said, pushing off a wall and floating clumsily into the vast, ruined space. The promenade had been an elegant, 2-tiered plaza. Now it was a scrapyard. Cargo containers, furniture, and the frozen bodies of the unfortunate drifted in a slow, macabre ballet. They found the first survivor pinned beneath a large, overturned kiosk selling Xylosian synth silks. It was a Vexian, a slender, four-armed being whose thin body was thankfully uncrushed, merely trapped. Its breathing mask was still in place, but its eyes were wide with terror. "Easy now," Ben said, his voice calm and reassuring, a doctor's voice. "We're here to help." The rescue was straightforward. While Ben monitored the Vexian's vitals and spoke to it in soothing tones, Ava used the last of her plasma cutter's energy in a quick, precise burst to slice through the kiosk's support leg. The Vexian freed clung to Ben with a desperate strength. "I've got him," Ben said. "His leg is broken, but he's stable. We need to get him to one of the emergency shelters." "Shelter's no good if we can't get out," Ava reminded him. "Scanner picking up anything else?" "Yes, stronger signal, deeper in, past the customs checkpoint." They tethered the grateful Vexian to Ben's suit and moved on, deeper into the wreckage. The next survivor was a far more complicated problem. It was a Xylosian, a massive, herbivorous creature that looked like a cross between a rhinoceros and a walking boulder. Its thick, plated hide was normally impervious to most physical harm, but a heavy support girder had fallen across its hindquarters, pinning it to the floor. Worse, the creature was in a state of primal panic. As they approached, it let out a low, rumbling bellow of rage and fear, thrashing its massive head and swiping at them with a thick, powerful tail. "Whoa, easy, big fella," Ava said, backpedaling hastily. "We're trying to help." "Its pain receptors are firing on all cylinders," Ben analyzed, keeping a safe distance. "And its threat response is completely overwhelming its rational thought. It sees us as predators trying to finish it off. So how do we get close enough to cut the girder? We have to sedate it. Its circulatory system is slow and diffused. A standard hypo spray won't work fast enough. I need to get a direct injection into the primary nerve cluster at the base of its skull. And it's currently trying to bash its skull against anything that moves," Ava pointed out dryly. "Any bright ideas?" Ben thought for a moment, his lamp beam playing over the thrashing creature. "Its species communicates through subsonic frequencies, and they have a strong olfactory response. Maybe I can distract it." He fumbled in his medkit. "I have a broad-spectrum neuroinhibitor gas, normally used for crowd control. It's harmless, but to a Xylosian's senses, it might be overpowering. If you can get its attention from the front, I'll try to circle around behind it." "Its attention, got it." Ava grabbed a loose piece of sheet metal about the size of a shield. "Hey, ugly, over here," she yelled, banging the metal against a wall. The sound was deadened in the near vacuum, but the vibrations traveled through the floor. The Xylosian's huge, dark eyes swiveled to her. It let out another furious roar and strained against the girder, trying to lunge at her. As it focused all its rage on Ava, Ben drifted silently behind it, a large syringe in his hand. He moved with a dancer's grace in the zero-G, landing softly on the floor behind the creature's head. With the Xylosian's attention fixed on Ava's noisy distraction, Ben plunged the needle into the thick hide at the base of its skull and depressed the plunger. For a moment, nothing happened. The Xylosian thrashed again, and Ava had to dodge a piece of debris it sent flying. Then, its movements became sluggish. The furious bellows softened to confused grunts. Its eyelids began to droop. Within a minute, the massive creature was unconscious. "Nice work, Doc," Ava breathed, her heart still pounding. "Just get it free," Ben said. "That sedative won't last forever." Plasma Cutter was dead, so Ava had to use the pry bar and raw strength, finding leverage points to slowly, painstakingly lift the massive girder centimeter by centimeter while Ben dragged the Xylosian's limp legs out from under it. It was grueling, muscle-shredding work. By the time they were done, both of them were panting, their limited air supply being consumed at an alarming rate. "'Kay," Ava said, leaning against the girder to catch her breath. "2 rescued." "Who's next?" Ben's scanner beeped again. "This one's strange. The signature is faint, and it's coming from the Arboretum." Arboretum had been one of Aethelburg's jewels, a vast, glass-domed chamber filled with exotic flora from a dozen methane and ammonia-heavy worlds. The dome was now a spiderweb of cracks, its precious atmosphere long gone. Strange, crystalline trees lay shattered, and the ammonia-rich soil was frozen solid. In the center of the ruin, huddled together behind a frozen fountain, were a cluster of small, delicate beings. They were Kik, an insectoid species whose bodies were composed of intricate spun silica filaments, making them look like creatures of glass. They were breathtakingly beautiful and suicidally fragile. They required a high-pressure methane atmosphere to live. Standard oxygen-nitrogen was poison to them. Now, in the hard vacuum, they were dying. Several were already inert, their glass-like bodies fractured. The 5 survivors were huddled together, their movements slow and weak, their internal bioluminescence fading. "Oh no," Ben whispered. "Their exoskeletons are cracking. They're depressurizing. We have to get them into a methane environment now." "Are no methane environments left, Ben. The whole sector is breached," Ava said, frustration and despair creeping into her voice. "Think, Ava, think," Ben urged, his own mind racing. "Maintenance, what's in this sector? What uses methane?" Ava's eyes scanned the wreckage. "Freighter fuel cells, some of the older models use refined methane. There was a refueling station in Bay 5. Can we get some?" "Maybe," Ava said, an idea sparking. "But how do we contain it? We can't move them one by one, they're too fragile." Eyes fell on a large, deflated cargo tarp, a heavy polymer sheet used for wrapping pallets. "The tarp," she said, pointing, "and the sealant foam. We can make a bag, a bubble." Was a desperate, insane plan. They worked with a frantic energy born of dwindling time and oxygen. They carefully herded the weak, shivering Kik onto the center of the tarp. The creatures offered no resistance, their multifaceted eyes tracking them with a kind of weary resignation. Then, Ava and Ben folded the edges of the tarp over them, and using the quickseal foam, glued the seams together, creating a large, clumsy, but airtight pouch. They left a small opening for a hose. "Now for the methane," Ava said. "Bay 5, stay here, keep them calm." She propelled herself out of the Arboretum and toward the cargo bays. Bay 5 was a disaster zone, but miraculously, one of the methane refueling lines was only damaged, not destroyed. It was hissing faintly, leaking the precious gas into space. Working with numb fingers, Ava managed to disconnect a flexible hose from a ruined loading droid and attach it to the leaking valve. It was a clumsy, insecure connection, but it held. She dragged the hose back to the Arboretum, a lifeline snaking through the debris field. Ben helped her insert the hose into the opening in their makeshift bubble. When she cracked the valve, the tarp began to inflate, slowly and carefully, with the life-giving gas. They watched through the semi-transparent polymer. Inside, as the pressure rose, the Kik stirred. Their fading internal lights flickered, then began to glow with a renewed, steady luminescence. One of them tentatively reached out a slender, glass-like limb and touched the inside of the bag, a gesture of what? Curiosity? Gratitude? They had done it. They had saved them. It was at that moment that the Cathar security team finally broke through. 4 armored figures floated into the Arboretum, their helmet lights catching Ava and Ben in their glare. They were no longer pointing stun rifles. They were holding rescue equipment. The lead Cathar, the same one from the corridor, floated toward them. His synthesized voice was different now. Not angry, not demanding. It held a new note. A note of confusion. By the first axiom, the Cathar said, his gaze fixed on the inflated bubble of methane and the glowing creatures within. How? Chief Vorlag watched the scene unfold on his command center display. He saw the humans deliver the Vexian to an emergency shelter they had managed to partially repressurize. He saw them stabilize the massive, unconscious Zelosian. And he saw the impossible, improvised rescue of the Kick. His security team's body cameras fed him a clear image of the makeshift containment bubble, the scavenged hose, the rescued aliens glowing with life. His mandibles worked silently. His analysts could now confirm that the initial impact had destabilized the freighter fuel cells. The second tremor Ava and Ben had felt was one of those cells cooking off in a subcritical detonation. It had, counterintuitively, collapsed a section of the bay in a way that smothered the other, more volatile cells, preventing a chain reaction that would have destroyed the entire sector, and possibly the station. The human's reckless entry had played no part in that. It was sheer, dumb luck. By his calculations, his models, his rigid adherence to protocol, all 17 survivors should be dead. His way was supposed to preserve the whole by sacrificing the part. His way was logical. His way was safe. Yet the 17 were now 16 survivors. One had succumbed before they could be reached, and they were alive not because of logic, but because of two reckless, disobedient, infuriatingly effective humans. They had used junk and ingenuity to perform rescues his own highly trained, perfectly equipped teams would have deemed impossible even without the quarantine order. Chief Vorlag, Tezel's voice broke the silence. Unit 4 reports they have secured the survivors. The humans, Ristova and Carter, are assisting them. Their suit oxygen levels are critical. Vorlag watched the two human life signs on the map. They were flashing red. They had expended almost all of their energy and air saving others, with no thought for their own extraction. It was the most illogical thing he had ever witnessed. "Order Unit 4 to provide immediate aid to the humans," Vorlag commanded, his voice flat. "Escort them and all survivors to the medical bay in the spire. Lift the quarantine on the access corridor. The structural threat has passed." He turned away from the holographic display. The image of the glowing Kick in their plastic bubble burned into his multifaceted eyes. He had followed his training. He had obeyed the axioms. He had done everything right. And he had been completely, utterly wrong. The equations were flawed. There was a variable he could not account for. The human variable. The main medical bay on Aethelburg Station was a sterile, calming environment of soft white light and quiet, rhythmic beeps. Now it was a hub of controlled chaos. Medical personnel from 3 different species hurried between curtained-off alcoves, their voices a low murmur of diagnoses and instructions. Ben Carter, stripped of the vacuum suit and back in his familiar medical scrubs, moved through the space with an exhausted but focused energy. He directed a gelatinous Lurian orderly on how to properly set the Vexian's fractured leg, conferred with a crystalline physician about the precise atmospheric mix for the Kick now housed in a proper environmental chamber, and checked the chart for the Zelosian, who was sleeping peacefully under heavy sedation, its vital signs stable. 17 lives had entered the disaster zone. Thanks to Ava and to blind luck, they had come out with 16, a number that felt both like a tragedy and a miracle. Ava Ristova was sitting on a diagnostic bed in the corner, a thermal blanket wrapped around her shoulders. A medical droid was tending to the cuts and bruises she'd gotten from being bounced around during the second tremor. She was bone-weary, every muscle screaming in protest, but her eyes were clear. She watched Ben work, a small, tired smile on her face. They'd done it. The doors to the med bay slid open and Chief Vorlag entered. He moved with his usual implacable stride, his black carapace absorbing the light. The chaotic room seemed to fall silent as he passed. He stopped in front of Ava's bed. Ben noticed and came to stand beside her, a protective gesture. Vorlag regarded them for a long moment, his multifaceted eyes impossible to read. "Technician Ristova, Dr. Carter," he began, his voice the familiar, synthesized baritone. "The official inquiry for your actions will be held tomorrow at the 9th hour. You will be required to attend." "We'll be there," Ava said, her voice hoarse. You violated over 30 separate station protocols, Vorlag continued, reciting them as if from memory. Unauthorized access to restricted equipment, willful breach of a Level 4 quarantine, ignoring direct orders from station command, reckless endangerment of station integrity. The list is extensive. And the list of people who are alive because of it is 16, Ben countered, his voice quiet but firm. Vorlag's head tilted slightly. That is an interesting piece of data. It is, however, irrelevant to the proceedings. The protocols exist to prevent catastrophic failure. Your actions, while coincidentally not leading to one, dramatically increase the probability of such an outcome. Your success was a matter of statistical anomaly, not sound judgment. Call it a statistical anomaly. I call it not giving up on people, Ava shot back, her weariness replaced by a flash of anger. Your sound judgment left them to die. Your models and your probabilities were a death sentence. My models preserved the lives of the other 8,000 beings on this station, Vorlag stated. A choice you did not have to make. He seemed about to say more, then stopped. He looked from Ava's defiant face to Ben's steady gaze, then over to the environmental chamber where the 5 Kick were now moving with renewed energy, their inner light a soft, golden glow. The inquiry is at the 9th hour, he repeated. And then, without another word, he turned and strode out of the med bay. Ava watched him go, a mix of anger and exhaustion washing over her. Arrogant, chitinous bastard, she muttered. He's not wrong, you know, Ben said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed next to her. From his perspective, it was a gamble. It could have gone horribly wrong. But it didn't, Ava said, looking at the survivors around them. It didn't. The inquiry was held in a stark, circular chamber high in the station's spire. The station's multi-species council sat on a raised dais, a collection of beings of all shapes and sizes, from the towering, robed Cathar counselor to the diminutive, furry form of the Pelian trade representative. Ava and Ben stood in the center of the room, feeling small and exposed. Vorlag presented the case for the prosecution. He was methodical, dispassionate, and devastatingly thorough. He used holographic displays to show the station's structural weaknesses after the impact, the volatility of the freighter fuel cells, the precise regulations the humans had broken. He played back calm recordings of their defiance. He presented a probability model that showed a 42% chance that their actions, specifically the use of the plasma cutter near the compromised blast door, could have triggered a sympathetic vibration and caused the very cascade failure he was trying to prevent. The defendants acted not out of heroism, Vorlag concluded, his voice resonating in the silent chamber, but out of a species-specific emotional response that prioritizes immediate, visible results over long-term strategic safety. They are not heroes, they are liabilities. To condone their actions is to invite chaos, to replace the logic that keeps us all alive with sentiment and luck. I recommend formal censure and their immediate removal from Aethelburg Station. When it was their turn to speak, Ava felt a knot of anger in her stomach. Ben placed a calming hand on her shoulder. No good at speeches, Ava began, her voice raw but clear. I'm a mechanic. I see things that are broken and I fix them. On that day, a part of our station was broken. And there were people inside. Chief Vorlag is right. I didn't run a probability model. I didn't calculate the risk to the whole station. I heard people screaming and then I heard silence. And in that silence, I knew if someone didn't do something, they were gone. She looked directly at Vorlag. You talk about your models, Chief, but your models are missing a gear. They don't have a variable for hope. They don't have a subroutine for trying, even when you'll probably fail. You saw 17 acceptable losses. We saw 17 chances. We failed on one, but we succeeded on 16. Ben stepped forward. The purpose of a society, the purpose of a place like Aethelburg, is not merely to exist. It is to protect its members, all of them. Protocol and logic are essential tools to achieve that. But when those tools tell you to stand by and allow sentient beings to die a preventable death, then the tools themselves have failed. They have become the problem. What Technician Rostova and I did was not a rejection of order. It was a course correction. The council deliberated for less than an hour. The station administrator, a calm, ancient being of a species that had seen empires rise and fall, delivered the verdict. The findings of this council are twofold, it announced, its voice like the rustling of old leaves. Firstly, Technician Ava Rostova and Dr. Ben Carter are found guilty of all 32 violations of station protocol as detailed by Chief Vorlag. Their actions were, by definition, reckless. They will be formally censured, and their pay will be docked for 2 cycles. A murmur went through the room. Vorlag stood impassively. Secondly, the administrator continued, its voice rising slightly, this council issues its highest commendation, the Aethelburg Star of Valor, to Technician Ava Rostova and Dr. Ben Carter for their extraordinary bravery and ingenuity in the saving of 16 lives. Their actions, while reckless, were also heroic. It is the finding of this council that in certain, rare circumstances, the two are not mutually exclusive. The administrator looked directly at the humans. The censure is for the official record. The commendation is for the history books. You are dismissed. And Ben walked out of the chamber into a crowd of reporters and well-wishers. The story of the reckless heroes of Aethelburg was already spreading like wildfire across the galactic comnet. News outlets from a dozen systems were running the story, complete with dramatic reenactments and interviews with the survivors. The Kick, speaking through a translator, called them bringers of the second breath. The gruff Zalosian freighter captain, Olo, once he was lucid, had sent them a case of his planet's most potent liquor with a simple note. You're crazy, and you're welcome on my ship anytime. Humans of Aethelburg Station were being praised and condemned in equal measure across the galaxy. The Cathar Imperium issued a formal statement condemning the Council's verdict as dangerously sentimental. A consortium of freighter guilds, however, declared Ava and Ben honorary members for life. It was a paradox, a controversy, and it made humanity the most talked-about species in the quadrant. Weeks turned into months. The station was repaired. Life returned to its normal, humming rhythm. The censure was a footnote in Ava's record, the commendation a medal she kept in a drawer. She went back to her work in the station's guts, listening to its familiar symphony. But something had changed. The work felt small. One day, she was recalibrating a power conduit deep in a service tunnel when her datapad chimed with an incoming priority message. It wasn't from Station Command. The insignia was one she didn't recognize, a stylized starburst flanked by 2 olive branches. It was the seal of the Galactic Concordance Fleet, the largest, most diverse military and exploration force in known space. The message requested her presence and that of Dr. Carter in a private conference room. They found a woman waiting for them. She was human, but she wore a crisp, dark blue uniform that was impeccably tailored. Her silver hair was cut short, and her eyes held the kind of weary intelligence that came from seeing too many worlds and too many battles. On her collar were the twin stars of a fleet admiral. "Rostova, Dr. Carter," she said, her voice warm but with an undercurrent of steel. "I am Admiral Jael Khorasani of the Concordance Fleet Command. Thank you for meeting me." "Admiral," Ava said, slightly awed. "What can we do for you?" "You can listen to a proposition," Khorasani said, leaning forward. "I've been in this fleet for 40 years. I've seen us handle invasions, stellar phenomena, and political crises. We have protocols and task forces for everything. But there's one area where we consistently fail: rapid, chaotic disaster response. The golden hour after a catastrophe, when the official response is still mobilizing and lives are being lost by the second." She brought up a holographic display. It showed images of a dozen different disasters: a colony hit by a seismic event, a starship torn open by a plasma storm, a research outpost suffering a biological containment failure. Every case, our response was too slow. We were too busy calculating risks, following procedure, waiting for the right equipment. By the time our perfect, by-the-book rescue teams arrived, there was often no one left to save. She swiped the display, and it changed to show security footage from the Aethelburg disaster. It showed Ava and Ben working furiously to save the Kick. "Then we heard about you," the Admiral said, a genuine smile touching her lips. "The story of the mechanics and medics who didn't wait for permission, who used a cargo tarp, sealant foam, and a pry bar to do what a billion-credit rescue vessel couldn't. The Cathar call you reckless. Many in the Concordance agree. They say you're unpredictable, a liability." She leaned back, her eyes locking onto theirs. I, however, think you're exactly what we've been missing. Protocols are for when things go according to plan. I need people for when the plan has been vaporized along with half the ship. I need people who don't just see regulations, but see the person trapped behind the burning door. What are you proposing, Admiral? Ben asked, his voice steady. Creating a new division within the fleet, she announced. The Emergency Response and Recovery Corps. Its call sign will be Forlorn Hope. Its mandate will be simple: be the first in and the last out. Improvise, adapt. Save who you can, however you can. Forget the calculus of acceptable losses. Every life is a universe, every second counts. She looked directly at Ava. I'm not just offering you a job, technician. I'm asking you to help me build it. We want you, and we want more like you. We're putting out recruitment feelers across all of human space. We're looking for firefighters, deep-sea welders, paramedics, combat engineers, anyone who knows how to hold things together with duct tape and sheer bloody-mindedness when the world is falling apart. Ava was silent for a long time. She looked at Ben, whose eyes were shining with a light she hadn't seen since they were working together in the ruins of Gamma 7. She thought of the crawl spaces, the familiar hum of the station, the comfortable safety of her routine. Then she thought of the glowing kick, the grateful Vexian, the quiet nod from the massive Zelosian. She thought of the feeling, not of recklessness, not of heroism, but of pure, undiluted purpose. "When do we start?" Ava asked. A wide grin spread across her face. Admiral Coruscant's smile widened. "As soon as you're packed, welcome to the fleet. Heaven help us all."